The morning sun cast long shadows across Kensington Palace as Catherine, Princess of Wales, stood by the tall windows of her private study. Her hands trembled slightly as she held the official letter that had arrived just hours before. The words seemed to blur together, but their meaning was crystal clear. Prince William would be departing for a 6-month military assignment overseas, leaving within the week. Catherine had always known this day might come. When she married into the royal family, she understood that duty would sometimes separate them, but knowing something intellectually and feeling it emotionally were entirely different experiences. The thought of being apart from William for half a year, especially with their 3 children needing both parents, made her heart feel heavy. She remembered their early days together at St. Andrew's University, when they were just Kate Middleton and William Wales, 2 young people falling in love without the weight of royal expectations on their shoulders. Those carefree days seemed like a lifetime ago now. Back then, their biggest worry was passing exams and finding time for each other between classes and rugby matches. The sound of footsteps in the hallway interrupted her thoughts. William appeared in the doorway, still wearing his morning exercise clothes, his face showing the same mix of determination and sadness that she felt. He had clearly been running longer than usual, his way of processing difficult news. "You've seen the orders," he said quietly, not really asking but stating what he already knew. Catherine nodded, placing the letter on her desk. 6 months in the Middle East. When do you leave? Thursday morning. The advance team is already preparing everything. William walked over to her, his military training evident in his posture, but his eyes soft with concern for his wife. The next few days passed in a blur of preparations and carefully managed emotions. They had to tell the children, George, Charlotte, and Louis, in a way that wouldn't frighten them, but would prepare them for their father's absence. Catherine watched William kneeling down to their level in the palace garden, explaining in simple terms that Daddy had an important job to do far away, but that he would call every day and come home as soon as he could. George, being the oldest at 10, understood more than he let on. Catherine could see the worry in his young eyes. The same eyes that mirrored his father's. Charlotte, 8 years old and fiercely protective of her family, asked direct questions about safety and danger that made both parents' hearts ache. Little Louis, only 5, seemed to grasp only that his father would be gone for a very long time, but trusted that everything would be okay because his parents said so. The royal staff worked quietly and efficiently around them, understanding the gravity of the situation. This wasn't just another royal engagement or public duty. This was a real military deployment with real risks. Security briefings were held behind closed doors. Plans were made for Catherine to take on additional royal duties while maintaining as normal a routine as possible for the children. Catherine found herself memorizing small details about William during these last few days. The way he stirred his morning tea exactly 3 times. How he always kissed the top of each child's head before they went to school. The sound of his laugh when Louis told one of his silly jokes at dinner. She wanted to hold on to these moments, knowing they would have to sustain her through the lonely months ahead. On Wednesday evening, their last full night together, they sat in their private sitting room after the children were asleep. The television was on, but neither was really watching. William was reviewing final mission details while Catherine worked on correspondence that had been piling up. The normalcy of the scene was both comforting and heartbreaking. "The hardest part isn't the mission itself," William said suddenly, looking up from his papers. "It's leaving you to handle everything alone. The children, the royal duties, the public appearances. It's too much for one person." Catherine set down her pen and looked at her husband. "We're a team, even when we're apart. You'll be doing your duty there, and I'll be doing ours here. The children will be proud of their father just as I am." They talked late into the night about practical things. School schedules, upcoming royal events, how to handle the media attention that would surely follow the deployment announcement. But underneath the logistics, they were both trying to say all the things that might be left unsaid, to express all the love and support they felt for each other. The palace staff had been briefed to give the family privacy for their goodbyes. But Catherine knew that despite their discretion, word of the emotional farewell would inevitably leak to the press. The royal family's most private moments had a way of becoming public knowledge, adding another layer of pressure to an already difficult situation. As they finally prepared for bed that last night, Catherine watched William pack his few remaining personal items. A photo of the family from their last vacation, a letter from Louis written in crayon, the watch Catherine had given him for their anniversary. These small reminders of home would travel with him to a place where danger was real and communication would be limited. Neither of them slept well that night. Catherine could feel William's restlessness beside her, and she knew he was thinking about the mission ahead and the family he was leaving behind. She lay awake listening to his breathing, trying to memorize even that simple sound. When dawn broke over London, it brought with it the reality they had been dreading. Thursday had arrived, and with it, the time for goodbyes that no amount of preparation could make easier. The morning of departure arrived gray and drizzly, as if the London sky understood the sadness hanging over Kensington Palace. Catherine woke before her alarm, finding William already up and dressed in his military uniform. The sight of him in full dress uniform always filled her with pride, but today it only emphasized the reality of his leaving. Breakfast was unusually quiet. The children seemed to sense the gravity of the day, eating their cereal with less chatter than usual. George kept glancing at his father's uniform, while Charlotte sat closer to William than normal. Louis, still too young to fully understand, asked when Daddy would be home for dinner, causing a moment of painful silence before William gently reminded him about their previous conversations. Catherine had arranged for the children to say their private goodbyes before the official departure. She watched as William hugged each child individually, whispering special words meant just for them. George stood straighter, trying to be brave like his father. Charlotte clung a little longer than usual. Louis giggled when William tickled him, the innocent sound both beautiful and heartbreaking in the solemn morning. "Remember," William told them as they gathered around him one last time, "Daddy loves you bigger than the whole sky, and that doesn't change no matter how far away I am." The children's nanny gently led them away to prepare for school, a normal routine that would help maintain some stability in their suddenly changed world. Catherine was grateful for these small constants, these threads of normalcy that would help hold their family together during the separation. With the children gone, the palace felt different, larger somehow, and quieter. Catherine and William had a few precious minutes alone before the cars would arrive to take him to the airbase. They walked through their private garden, the same paths they had strolled as newlyweds, where they had played with their children on countless afternoons. "I've left letters," William said quietly as they paused by the rose garden that Catherine had planted in their first year of marriage. "One for each month I'll be away, for you and for each of the children. The staff knows when to deliver them." Catherine felt tears threatening but held them back. They had promised each other to be strong for this farewell, knowing that breaking down would only make everything harder. "I'll write to you every week," she replied. "Even if I can't send them right away because of security, I'll write down everything. What the children are doing, funny things they say, how the garden grows." They talked about video calls when possible, about time zones and communication windows. The technical details of staying connected across thousands of miles felt both crucial and inadequate. How could scheduled phone calls replace the comfort of presence, the reassurance of a touch, the simple joy of sharing daily life? Security personnel began moving with more purpose around the palace grounds. Cars were pulling up. The time for departure was approaching, bringing with it the moment both Catherine and William had been dreading, their final goodbye. Catherine changed into a navy blue coat dress, chosen specifically because it was William's favorite color on her. She wanted him to remember her looking her best, not sad and worried. Her hair was styled simply, her makeup carefully applied to hide the evidence of a sleepless night. She wore the sapphire engagement ring that had once belonged to William's mother, Diana, a reminder of the love stories that came before theirs and the challenges they had overcome. The media had been kept at a distance, but Catherine knew photographers with telephoto lenses would be positioned far enough away to capture images while respecting the privacy cordon. Every expression, every gesture would be analyzed and discussed. She had learned long ago to maintain composure under such scrutiny, but today felt different. Today, genuine emotion threatened to overwhelm her royal training. William appeared in the entrance hall, his military bearing perfect, his expression controlled. But Catherine could see the tension in his jaw, the way his hands remained carefully clasped behind his back. She knew all his tells, all the small signs that revealed his true feelings beneath the composed exterior. "The cars are ready, Your Royal Highness," announced the private secretary, his voice respectfully quiet. This was it. The moment they had both been preparing for and dreading. Catherine walked with William to the palace entrance, their footsteps echoing in the grand hallway lined with portraits of his ancestors. So many of them had faced similar moments, wives sending husbands to war, families separated by duty, love tested by distance and danger. Outside, a small convoy waited. Military personnel stood at attention. Palace staff who had worked with the family for years lined up to say their farewells, their faces showing the affection they felt for the prince who had always treated them with kindness and respect. William shook hands and exchanged words with each staff member, thanking them for their service and asking them to take special care of his family. Catherine watched him move through these formal goodbyes, seeing how much each interaction cost him emotionally, even as he maintained his professional demeanor. Then there was no one left to say goodbye to except each other. They stood facing each other in front of the palace entrance, aware that photographers were capturing this moment from a distance, that this farewell would be seen around the world. But in that instant, none of that mattered. They were simply a husband and wife facing separation, two people in love who had to find the strength to let go. "I'll miss you every day," William said quietly, his voice steady but his eyes intense. "Come home safe," Catherine replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "That's all I need, for you to come home safe." They moved toward each other then, royal protocol momentarily forgotten. The embrace they shared was long and tight, filled with all the love they couldn't put into words, all the fear they couldn't voice, all the hope they held for the future. Catherine felt William's arms around her, memorizing the feel of his strength, his warmth, his presence. When they finally pulled apart, both had tears in their eyes. Catherine reached up to touch William's face one last time, and he caught her hand, pressing it against his cheek for a moment before letting go. "I love you," he said simply. "I love you too," she replied. "Now go and do what you need to do." William climbed into the waiting car and Catherine stepped back, her hand raised in a small wave. As the convoy pulled away, she watched until the cars disappeared through the palace gates, taking her husband away from her and toward an uncertain future in a dangerous place. Only then, as she stood alone in front of Kensington Palace, did Catherine allow herself to truly feel the weight of what had just happened. The woman who would now have to be strong for 3 children, who would have to carry on royal duties and public appearances while her heart was thousands of miles away, finally let the tears come. The silence that followed the departure of the convoy felt deafening. Catherine stood motionless for several long moments, watching the empty gate where William's car had disappeared just minutes before. The palace staff, understanding her need for a private moment, had retreated to give her space to process what had just happened. A gentle rain began to fall, matching the tears that Catherine had finally allowed to come. She pulled her coat tighter around herself, not yet ready to go back inside to face the reality of the palace without William. The building that had been their home, filled with laughter and family life, now felt impossibly large and empty. Lady Sarah, Catherine's lady-in-waiting and close friend, appeared quietly at her side with an umbrella. She didn't speak, simply stood with Catherine in understanding silence. Sometimes the most meaningful support came not from words, but from presence, from someone willing to share in grief without trying to fix it or rush it along. "The children will be home from school in 3 hours," Lady Sarah said gently, when Catherine finally turned toward the palace entrance. Catherine nodded, wiping her eyes with the handkerchief William had given her before he left, one of his, so it still carried his scent. "I need to be ready for them. They'll want to know that everything is going to be okay." But first, Catherine needed a few moments to herself. She went to their private sitting room, the one where she and William spent quiet evenings together, where they reviewed their schedules and discussed family matters. His reading glasses were still on the side table next to his favorite chair. The book he had been reading lay open to the page where he had stopped the night before. Catherine picked up the book and closed it carefully, running her fingers over the cover. These small reminders of William's presence were everywhere. His coffee cup from that morning, still in the sink. His morning newspaper, folded the way he always left it. The dent in his pillow where his head had rested just hours before. The phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was William, calling from the airport before his flight departed. "I'm about to board," he said, his voice sounding distant but warm. "I wanted to hear your voice one more time before I'm out of contact for the next day." "How are you feeling?" Catherine asked, settling into his chair and pulling a throw blanket around herself. "Like I've left my heart behind," William admitted, "but ready to do what needs to be done so I can come home to you all." They talked for just a few minutes about practical things. When he expected to arrive at the base, when they might be able to speak again. Reminders about George's football match that weekend and Charlotte's piano recital the following week. Normal family conversations that felt both precious and painful under the circumstances. "Tell the children I love them," William said as boarding was announced in the background. "Tell them yourself when you call tonight," Catherine replied, though she wasn't sure if tonight's call would be possible given his travel schedule. After they hung up, Catherine sat holding the phone for several minutes. Soon, even these brief calls would become precious and rare, subject to military schedules and security protocols. She would have to learn to find comfort in voicemails and text messages, in photographs sent across continents, in letters that might take weeks to arrive. When the children returned from school that afternoon, Catherine was waiting for them in the family room, having changed out of her formal farewell attire into comfortable clothes that suggested normalcy and stability. She had prepared their favorite snacks and had activities planned, anything to keep them busy and engaged during these first difficult hours. "Did Daddy's plane take off?" George asked immediately upon seeing her. "Yes, sweetheart. He's on his way to his assignment now. He wanted me to tell you how proud he is of all of you for being so brave." Charlotte curled up next to Catherine on the sofa. "When can we talk to him?" "We'll try tonight, but it might be tomorrow depending on his travel schedule," Catherine explained, stroking her daughter's hair. "But remember, even when we can't talk to him, Daddy is thinking about us every single day." Louis, seemingly less affected by the change than his older siblings, played with his toy soldiers on the floor, creating elaborate battle scenes. But Catherine noticed he kept looking toward the door, as if expecting his father to walk in at any moment. That evening, they gathered around Catherine's phone when William was finally able to call from his layover. The connection was poor, his voice cutting in and out, but hearing him was enough to lift the children's spirits temporarily. He asked about their school day, reminded them of their upcoming activities, and told them he missed them already. After the children went to bed, Catherine walked through the palace rooms, checking that everything was secure for the night. This had always been William's routine, something he did automatically before coming to bed. Now it fell to her, along with so many other responsibilities that they had always shared. In the weeks that followed, Catherine settled into a new rhythm. She woke earlier to handle correspondence and official duties before the children got up, trying to maintain their normal routine as much as possible. She attended royal engagements with a grace that impressed even seasoned palace observers, never letting her personal situation affect her public duties. The media coverage was relentless but respectful. Headlines spoke of her dignity and strength, of how she was handling single parenthood with characteristic poise. But Catherine rarely read the articles. She was too busy living the reality to pay attention to how others perceived it. Letters from William arrived sporadically, depending on mail delivery to his remote base. Each one was treasured, read multiple times, and shared with the children when appropriate. He wrote about the landscape where he was stationed, about the other soldiers he worked with, about how he watched the stars at night and thought of home. He never wrote about the dangerous aspects of his mission, but Catherine could read between the lines. Video calls became precious events, scheduled around time zones and military operations. Sometimes they lasted only a few minutes before connection problems or urgent duties interrupted. But seeing William's face, watching him interact with the children even through a screen, provided comfort that phone calls alone couldn't match. Catherine found herself taking photographs constantly of the children doing ordinary things, of the garden changing with the seasons, of family life continuing in William's absence. She wanted him to see how they were carrying on, to know that while they missed him terribly, they were managing and even finding moments of joy. 3 months into the deployment, Catherine received a package with no return address. Inside was a stuffed lion for Louis, a book about astronomy for George, a set of colored pencils for Charlotte, and a small jewelry box for her. The accompanying note in William's handwriting simply said, "Thinking of my family today and every day." The surprise package reminded Catherine that even thousands of miles away, William was still finding ways to be a present father and husband. He was still thinking about what would make each of them smile, still participating in their lives even from a distance. On difficult days when the children were upset about missing their father, or when royal duties felt overwhelming to handle alone, Catherine would think back to that morning farewell. She would remember William's words about duty and service, about the importance of the work he was doing. She would recall the pride in his eyes when he looked at his uniform, the sense of purpose that had carried him through their goodbye. The heartbreaking farewell hug had been an ending, but it was also a beginning. It was the start of 6 months during which Catherine would discover strengths she didn't know she possessed, during which the children would learn about sacrifice and service, during which their family would prove that love could bridge any distance. As autumn gave way to winter, Catherine often stood by the same windows where she had first read William's deployment orders. But now, instead of dreading the separation, she was counting down the days until his return. The farewell that had broken her heart had also revealed its true strength, strong enough to endure any separation, deep enough to overcome any challenge, and certain enough to trust in reunion.